Your mind is a battlefield no one else can see. People look at your smile and assume peace, but they don't hear the storms that rage behind your thoughts. They don't know how many nights you've wrestled with doubt, fear, and the quiet voice that keeps asking if you are enough. But I came here with a word for every weary mind and every tired soul. Strength is not something you are born with, it is something you build. And tonight, we are building it from the inside out. Some of you have been strong for everybody else while silently breaking within yourself. You carried expectations that were too heavy, memories that were too painful, and thoughts that were too loud, yet you are still here. That means something inside you refused to surrender. Mental strength is not the absence of struggle. It is the decision to rise while the struggle is still speaking. It is choosing faith when your feelings are shaking. You cannot control every storm that enters your life, but you can train your mind to stand when the winds begin to rise. A mentally strong person is not someone who never cries, never doubts, or never falls. A mentally strong person is someone who refuses to stay down. And today is the day you stop surviving your thoughts and start leading them. Some of us wake up every morning already tired, not because our bodies lack rest, but because our minds never learned how to rest. The moment your eyes open, thoughts rush in like uninvited guests, reminders of past mistakes, worries about tomorrow, comparisons that make you feel small, and fears that whisper you are not ready. A weak mind accepts every thought as truth, but a strong mind learns to question what it hears. Just because a thought appears does not mean it deserves to stay. Just because fear speaks does not mean it is right. Mental strength begins the moment you realize that your thoughts are not your master. Too many people live their lives being dragged around by emotions they never learned to manage. One bad moment ruins the entire day. One rejection feels like a final verdict. One mistake becomes a lifelong label. But a mentally strong person understands that emotions are signals, not commands. You can feel sadness without becoming hopeless. You can feel fear without becoming frozen. You can feel pressure without becoming broken. Strength begins when you stop giving temporary feelings permanent authority over your life. There are voices that have followed you for years. Some came from childhood, some came from failure, some came from people who spoke carelessly into seasons when you were vulnerable. Those voices told you that you were weak, incapable, slow, or unworthy. Over time, those voices stopped sounding like strangers and started sounding like you. And now, the greatest battle you fight is not against the world, it is against the voice inside your own head. Mental strength means learning how to speak back to the lies that once defined you. Your mind cannot become strong if it feeds on weakness every day. What you listen to shapes how you think. What you think shapes how you act. What you act upon shapes who you become. If your environment constantly reminds you of limitation, your mind will shrink to fit those boundaries. But when you begin to feed your mind truth, courage, and possibility, something begins to shift. New thoughts create new directions. New directions create new lives. Some people are waiting for confidence before they take action, but mental strength works in the opposite direction. Confidence is built through movement. Every time you do something difficult, your mind records evidence that you are capable. Every time you face something uncomfortable, your mind expands its understanding of what you can survive. Strength grows through repetition. Courage grows through practice. Your mind remembers every time you quit early. It remembers every promise you made to yourself and abandoned. It remembers every moment you chose comfort instead of growth. But the beautiful thing about the mind is that it can learn a new pattern. The moment you begin keeping small promises to yourself, something powerful happens. When you say you will wake up early and you do it, your mind takes note. When you say you will try again and you follow through, your mind begins to trust you. Mental strength grows when your words and your actions begin to match. You cannot build a strong mind while constantly running from discomfort. Growth lives on the other side of resistance. The moments you want to avoid are often the moments that shape you the most. Every challenge you face is teaching your mind how to endure. Every obstacle is training your thoughts to stay steady under pressure. What feels like pressure today is building the strength you will depend on tomorrow. Some of you think mental strength means never needing help, but true strength includes knowing when to seek wisdom and support. Isolation weakens perspective. When you are alone with your fears for too long, they begin to sound logical. But strength grows when you allow truth to interrupt your worst assumptions. A strong mind is humble enough to learn and courageous enough to change. Your thoughts create pictures of the future before your feet ever walk into it. If your mind constantly imagines failure, you will approach opportunities with hesitation. If your mind constantly rehearses defeat, you will shrink when it is time to rise. But when your mind learns to see possibility, your steps begin to move differently. You start walking with intention instead of fear. There will be days when your thoughts feel heavier than your circumstances. Nothing outside looks broken, yet everything inside feels unstable. Those are the moments when mental strength matters the most. Strength is choosing steady thoughts when chaos is loud. Strength is refusing to let one dark moment define your entire story. Strength is holding on to truth when your feelings try to pull you away from it. Your mind is always listening to you. The way you speak about yourself becomes the language your thoughts repeat. If you constantly call yourself weak, your mind will believe weakness is your identity. If you constantly focus on what you lack, your mind will learn to see limitation everywhere. But when you begin to speak life over yourself, something begins to realign inside you. Your thoughts begin to shift toward growth instead of defeat. Mental strength requires patience because transformation rarely happens overnight. You will have days when your progress feels invisible, days when old habits return. Days when doubt feels louder than hope, but strength is not proven in perfect days. It is proven in persistent ones. Every time you begin again, you reinforce the belief that failure does not define you. Some battles are won in silence long before they are seen in public. The decision to keep going when no one is watching is where mental strength is forged. The choice to stand up after disappointment is where resilience is born. The commitment to keep believing when results are slow is where endurance is built. A strong mind learns how to pause before reacting. Not every situation deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every criticism deserves a response. Strength is knowing the difference between what requires action and what requires release. There is power in learning how to redirect your thoughts. When negativity appears, you do not have to entertain it. When fear rises, you do not have to obey it. When doubt speaks, you do not have to agree. The strongest minds are not free from negative thoughts. They simply refuse to give those thoughts control. Every day your mind is becoming something. It is either growing stronger or becoming weaker. There is no neutral ground. Every decision you make is shaping the way you think. Every reaction you choose is training your inner world. The question is not whether your mind is changing. The question is whether you are guiding that change. Pain has a language that only the wounded understand. It speaks in memories you try to outrun and in moments that replay when the room grows quiet. Some of you learned how to smile while carrying stories that would make other people collapse. You learned how to function while your heart was still healing. You learned how to keep moving even when nothing inside you felt steady. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that your pain was proof that you were weak, that what you went through disqualified you from becoming strong. But pain is not always a sign of defeat. Sometimes pain is the very place where power is being formed. There are lessons that comfort will never teach you. Ease may make you happy for a moment, but struggle introduces you to parts of yourself that you never knew existed. When everything is going well, you only see your surface strength. But when life presses against you, when plans fall apart, when people disappoint you, when doors close without explanation, something deeper begins to emerge. Pain forces you to dig beneath appearances and discover what truly holds you together. Some of the strongest people you admire did not become strong because life was gentle with them. They became strong because they survived what was meant to silence them. They learned how to stand in places where they once thought they would collapse. The strength you see in them was not handed to them. It was shaped in moments when they felt alone, confused, and uncertain. Power is often hidden inside experiences that once felt unbearable. Pain has a way of stripping away illusions. It shows you what is real and what is temporary. It reveals which relationships can endure pressure and which ones disappear when the storm begins. It exposes the difference between what you wanted and what you truly needed. Pain refines your vision until you can see your life with clarity instead of assumptions. There are people who spend their lives trying to escape pain, not realizing that avoidance can keep them trapped. When you refuse to face what hurt you, the memory does not disappear. It settles quietly beneath the surface and influences your decisions. You start avoiding opportunities because you fear being hurt again. You begin guarding your heart so tightly that growth cannot enter. But healing begins when you allow yourself to confront what you have been carrying. The moment you acknowledge your pain, you begin reclaiming your power. Naming what hurt you removes the secrecy that once gave it control. When you bring your wounds into the light, you start to understand that what happened to you is not the end of your story. The past may explain you, but it does not have the authority to define your future. Pain teaches endurance in ways comfort never could. There were seasons when you thought you would not make it through the night, yet morning still found you breathing. There were moments when your heart felt too heavy to carry, yet somehow you kept going. Every time you survived a difficult season, your mind learned a new definition of strength. You became living proof that you can endure more than you once believed possible. Sometimes pain arrives without warning. One conversation changes everything. One loss rearranges your world. One disappointment shifts your direction. You did not prepare for it, and you did not choose it, yet it became part of your journey. And while you may never understand why it happened, you can decide what it produces in you. Pain can make you bitter, or it can make you better. The difference lies in how you interpret what you endured. When pain is left unattended, it turns into resentment. Resentment locks your thoughts in the past and keeps your heart tied to moments that cannot be changed. But when pain is processed with honesty, it becomes wisdom. Wisdom teaches you how to set boundaries where you once had none. Wisdom teaches you how to recognize what is healthy and what is harmful. Wisdom teaches you how to protect your peace without losing your compassion. There are scars on your life that remind you of where you have been. Some of those scars still ache when certain memories resurface. Yet scars are evidence of healing. They show that something tried to break you and failed. They show that even though you were wounded, you did not remain destroyed. Your scars tell a story of survival that your doubts often forget. Pain also reshapes your perspective. The things that once seemed urgent begin to lose their importance. The approval you once chased begins to matter less. The fears that once controlled you begin to shrink. Pain has a way of clarifying what truly deserves your energy. It teaches you to value peace more than popularity and growth more than comfort. Some people measure strength by how little emotion they show, but true strength is not emotional numbness. True strength is feeling deeply and still choosing to move forward. It is allowing yourself to grieve what you lost without losing hope for what remains. It is admitting that something hurt you without surrendering your future to that hurt. There are parts of you that could only be discovered through difficulty. Compassion grows in people who understand suffering. Patience grows in people who have waited through uncertainty. Courage grows in people who have faced fear and kept going anyway. The very qualities that make you strong today may have been born in seasons you once wished away. Pain changes how you see other people. When you understand struggle, you begin to notice it in others. You learn to listen more carefully and judge less quickly. You recognize that behind every smile, there may be a story you cannot see. Pain softens your heart even as it strengthens your spirit. Some wounds heal quickly, but others take time. Healing is not a straight line. There are days when you feel strong and days when memories return unexpectedly. There are moments when you believe you have moved forward and moments when you realize there is still work to do. Mental strength is not pretending the pain is gone. It is choosing progress even while healing continues. You may wish that your story had been easier. You may look at others and wonder why their path seems smoother than yours. But comparison hides the purpose that pain may be shaping in your life. The struggles you faced may be preparing you to stand in places where your voice will matter. The battles you fought may become the very message that helps someone else survive. Pain has a way of teaching independence. There were moments when you had no choice but to rely on your own inner strength. You learned how to stand when support was limited. You learned how to encourage yourself when no one else understood. You learned how to keep believing when reassurance was absent. There is a difference between carrying pain and being carried by pain. When pain carries you, it determines your direction. It tells you where you can go and what you can attempt. But when you carry pain with awareness, you transform it into experience instead of limitation. You begin to use what you learned as a guide instead of a prison. Every difficult season left something behind inside you. Sometimes it left caution where there once was innocence. Sometimes it left wisdom where there once was naivety. Sometimes it left resilience where there once was fragility. Even the moments that felt empty were shaping something unseen within you. Pain forces you to grow in places you never intended to develop. You discover strength in conversations you were afraid to have. You discover courage in decisions you hesitated to make. You discover endurance in days you thought would defeat you. Growth often appears disguised as hardship. There were moments when you thought your pain meant you were falling apart, but sometimes falling apart is the beginning of being rebuilt. The pieces of your life that broke open created space for something stronger to emerge. The person you are becoming is not despite your pain, but partly because of it. Every tear you shed carried a lesson your mind was learning. Every disappointment shaped your expectations. Every challenge expanded your capacity to endure. You may not have chosen those experiences, but they became part of the strength you carry today. Pain stretches your mind beyond what once felt comfortable. It forces you to confront questions you once avoided. It pushes you to search for meaning when nothing feels certain. In that search, your understanding deepens and your perspective widens. Some of the confidence you have today exists because you survived what once terrified you. Situations that once seemed impossible are now part of your history. The fears that once controlled you have lost their authority because experience showed you that you could endure. Pain has a way of revealing hidden strength in ordinary people. You did not know how resilient you were until life required resilience. You did not know how determined you were until quitting seemed easier than continuing. You did not know how strong your mind could become until circumstances demanded strength. Most people want stability, but very few people are willing to live the kind of life that creates it. They pray for peace while entertaining chaos. They ask for clarity while living without structure. They want confidence while avoiding commitment. But discipline is the quiet force that turns scattered effort into steady strength. Discipline is not loud and it is not glamorous. It does not announce itself with applause. It shows up in small decisions made consistently long before anyone notices the results. Mental strength is not built in dramatic moments. It is formed in ordinary days. It is built when you wake up and choose purpose instead of delay. It is built when you do what needs to be done even when motivation is missing. Feelings change quickly, but discipline creates a rhythm that keeps you moving even when emotions are uncertain. When your life has rhythm, your mind begins to find stability. Some people live according to how they feel in the moment. If they feel inspired, they work. If they feel discouraged, they stop. If they feel confident, they try. If they feel afraid, they withdraw. But feelings are unpredictable guides. A life directed only by emotion will always feel unstable. Discipline becomes the anchor that keeps you steady when emotions rise and fall. There are mornings when the bed feels more convincing than your goals. There are days when distraction feels easier than focus. There are moments when comfort whispers louder than purpose. Discipline is the decision to move anyway. It is choosing what matters most over what feels easiest. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, your mind becomes stronger and more reliable. Structure protects your peace more than you realize. When your days have direction, your thoughts become less scattered. When your priorities are clear, your mind spends less time negotiating with itself. Indecision drains mental energy, but discipline reduces confusion. A structured life frees your mind from constant uncertainty and creates space for clarity. Many people believe discipline restricts freedom, but discipline actually creates freedom. When you learn to control your habits stop controlling you. When you learn to manage your time begins to serve your purpose. Without discipline, life becomes reactive. With discipline, life becomes intentional. Small routines may seem insignificant, yet they shape the way you think. The way you begin your morning influences the direction of your day. The habits you repeat become the patterns your mind expects. When you train your mind to follow healthy routines, stability begins to grow from the inside out. Consistency builds trust between you and yourself. Every time you follow through on a commitment, your mind records evidence that you are dependable. When you repeatedly break promises to yourself, your confidence begins to weaken. Discipline restores that trust. It shows your mind that your intentions can be believed. Some people wait for the perfect moment to become disciplined, but discipline rarely begins in perfect conditions. It begins in imperfect circumstances where excuses are easy to find. You begin while you are still learning. You begin while you still feel uncertain. You begin while distractions still exist. Discipline grows stronger each time you continue despite inconvenience. Your environment influences your discipline more than you may realize. A cluttered space often creates a cluttered mind. Constant noise makes it difficult to think clearly. Endless distraction weakens focus. When you create order around you, your thoughts begin to mirror that order. Stability outside encourages stability within. There is power in doing simple things well, making your commitments clear, keeping your word, showing up on time, finishing what you start. These actions may appear small, but they train your mind to operate with integrity. A disciplined life is built through reliable behavior repeated over time. Some people imagine discipline as harsh or rigid, but healthy discipline is not punishment. It is guidance. It is a system that supports your growth. It protects you from drifting in directions that weaken you. It keeps you aligned with the person you are trying to become. Mental stability requires boundaries. Without boundaries, every demand competes for your attention. Every distraction steals your focus. Discipline teaches you how to protect your time and energy. It helps you recognize that not every opportunity is necessary and not every request deserves a yes. There will be days when discipline feels exhausting, days when the effort feels heavier than the reward, days when progress seems invisible. Those are the days when discipline matters the most. Anyone can stay committed when results are obvious, but discipline proves itself when effort continues without immediate recognition. Your habits are shaping your future even when you do not see the results right away. The choices you repeat today are becoming the reality you will live tomorrow. Discipline allows you to invest in a future that has not yet arrived. It requires believing that consistent effort will eventually produce visible change. Some of the strongest minds in the world are not necessarily the most talented, they are simply the most consistent. Talent may create opportunity, but discipline sustains growth. Talent may open doors, but discipline helps you remain prepared when those doors appear. Discipline teaches patience. It reminds you that meaningful change rarely happens quickly. When you commit to steady effort, you learn how to value progress instead of perfection. You begin to understand that growth is measured in small improvements repeated over time. There is a quiet confidence that comes from living with discipline. You walk differently when you know you have prepared. You think differently when you know you have practiced. You respond differently when you know you have trained your mind to remain steady under pressure. Excuses weaken discipline because they shift responsibility away from your choices. It becomes easy to blame circumstances, timing, or other people. But discipline grows when you accept ownership of your decisions. Responsibility strengthens your sense of control and builds resilience within your mind. Every disciplined decision strengthens your ability to make the next one. The more often you choose focus, the easier focus becomes. The more often you choose persistence, the more natural persistence feels. Discipline creates momentum that carries you forward even when motivation fades. There are moments when you will fail to meet your own expectations. Discipline does not mean perfection. It means returning to the path after you have stepped away. It means learning from mistakes without allowing them to define your identity. It means choosing progress again and again. A disciplined mind learns how to delay gratification. It understands that temporary discomfort can produce lasting reward. It chooses preparation over procrastination. It chooses growth over convenience. This ability to wait for meaningful results creates stability that impulsive decisions cannot sustain. Mental strength grows when your actions align with your values. When you live according to what truly matters to you, your mind experiences less internal conflict. Discipline helps you maintain that alignment even when distractions attempt to pull you away. The discipline you build in one area of life begins to influence other areas. When you learn to control your schedule, you begin to control your focus. When you learn to control your focus, you begin to control your reactions. Stability spreads from one habit into many others. Some people underestimate the power of repetition. Doing something once may create inspiration, but doing something consistently creates transformation. Every repeated action reinforces a pattern within your mind. Over time, those patterns become the foundation of your character. Discipline teaches you how to remain steady when life becomes unpredictable. While circumstances may change, your habits provide continuity. When everything around you feels uncertain, disciplined routines remind you that stability still exists within your control. Your future self is shaped by the discipline you practice today. The strength you will rely on tomorrow is being built through the choices you make now. Every moment of consistency is preparing you for challenges you have not yet faced. Discipline is not only about productivity, it is also about balance. Knowing when to work and when to rest, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, knowing when to push forward and when to pause. A disciplined life creates harmony that allows your mind to remain steady. There is a calmness that develops when your life becomes ordered. Your thoughts become less frantic, your decisions become more deliberate, your reactions become more measured. Discipline replaces chaos with clarity and uncertainty with direction. Each disciplined day strengthens the belief that you can rely on yourself. That belief becomes the foundation of mental stability. When your mind knows that you will continue showing up, it becomes less afraid of the future and less shaken by difficulty. Before you can become mentally strong, you must understand who you believe you are. Identity sits quietly beneath every decision you make. It shapes what you attempt and what you avoid. It determines how you interpret failure and how you respond to success. Long before actions appear on the outside, identity has already made choices on the inside. Many people try to change their behavior without ever addressing the beliefs they carry about themselves. And when identity remains unchanged, old patterns return no matter how determined they once felt. Some of you are fighting battles that began with labels placed on you years ago. Words spoken in careless moments settled deep in your mind and started forming a picture of who you thought you were. Maybe someone called you weak and you started seeing yourself as fragile. Maybe someone doubted your ability and you began shrinking before opportunities even arrived. Maybe you were overlooked so often that you started believing you were invisible. Over time, those labels stopped sounding like opinions and started sounding like truth. Your mind behaves according to the story it believes. If you believe you are easily defeated, you will approach challenges expecting loss. If you believe you are incapable, you will hesitate when it is time to act. If you believe you are unworthy, you will settle for less than you deserve. Identity becomes the filter through which every experience passes. Two people can face the same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes because they see themselves differently. Mental strength begins with rewriting the story you tell about yourself. The past may have introduced certain chapters, but it does not have the authority to finish the book. The person you were in your weakest season is not the only version of you that exists. Growth introduces new possibilities, but those possibilities require you to see yourself differently than you did before. Some people try to change their lives while still holding on to an identity built in broken seasons. They attempt new goals while quietly believing they will fail. They pursue growth while secretly doubting their worth. That internal conflict drains energy and weakens determination. When your identity and your goals disagree, progress becomes difficult to sustain. You cannot consistently perform in a way that contradicts what you believe about yourself. If you see yourself as undisciplined, discipline will always feel temporary. If you see yourself as fearful, courage will always feel unnatural. But when your identity shifts, your behavior begins to follow. Actions that once felt impossible begin to feel aligned with who you believe you are becoming. Identity is strengthened through evidence. Every time you make a decision that reflects growth, you reinforce a new belief about yourself. Every time you stand firm when you once would have given up, your mind records proof of change. Identity transformation does not happen through words alone. It happens through lived experience repeated over time. There are parts of your identity that were formed by survival. You learned how to protect yourself in environments that demanded caution. You learned how to stay quiet when speaking felt risky. You learned how to avoid disappointment by lowering expectations. Those strategies may have helped you endure difficult seasons, but they may no longer serve the person you are becoming. Mental strength requires the courage to release identities that no longer fit. Holding on to outdated versions of yourself keeps you tied to limitations that no longer have authority. Growth sometimes feels uncomfortable because it requires stepping beyond familiar patterns. The person you are becoming may feel unfamiliar at first, but unfamiliar does not mean untrue. Some people confuse identity with past behavior. They say, I have always been this way, as though history must determine destiny. But identity is not frozen in time. Human beings have the capacity to change and develop throughout their lives. The habits you once practiced do not have to remain permanent definitions. Your inner dialogue reveals what you believe about yourself. The words you repeat inside your mind shape the boundaries you accept. When you constantly remind yourself of your failures, your mind learns to expect defeat. When you constantly compare yourself to others, your mind learns to feel inadequate. But when you begin to speak with intention, your thoughts begin to reflect possibility instead of limitation. Confidence grows when identity becomes stable. A person who knows who they are is less shaken by criticism and less dependent on approval. Opinions may still matter, but they no longer determine direction. Stability comes from having an inner sense of self that remains steady even when external circumstances shift. Some people try to borrow identity from the expectations of others. They become who they think they are supposed to be instead of who they truly are. They chase approval instead of authenticity. But borrowed identities create fragile confidence because they depend on constant validation. When approval disappears, uncertainty returns. A strong identity is rooted in self-awareness. Understanding your strengths allows you to use them intentionally. Understanding your weaknesses allows you to grow with honesty. Self-awareness removes illusions and replaces them with clarity. Clarity creates direction, and direction strengthens the mind. There will be moments when your identity is tested. Failure will try to convince you that you are not capable. Rejection will try to convince you that you are not valuable. Difficulty will try to convince you that you are not strong enough. Those moments reveal whether your identity is built on temporary outcomes or deeper convictions. The way you interpret setbacks depends on how you see yourself. A person who believes they are resilient sees obstacles as challenges to overcome. A person who believes they are fragile sees obstacles as proof of limitation. Identity shapes interpretation long before results appear. Growth requires patience because identity transformation takes time. You may intellectually understand that you are changing while emotionally still feeling connected to who you used to be. Old thoughts may return even as new habits form. Progress often happens gradually, and the shift may feel subtle before it becomes obvious. Some of the strongest people are those who decided they would no longer be defined by their worst moments. They refused to let mistakes become permanent labels. They refused to let failure determine their future. They chose to see themselves through the lens of possibility rather than regret. Your identity influences the boundaries you set. When you believe you deserve respect, you stop tolerating what diminishes you. When you believe your time has value, you protect it more carefully. When you believe your growth matters, you choose environments that support development instead of discouraging it. There is power in choosing identity intentionally instead of accepting it passively. Instead of asking who you have always been, you begin asking who you are becoming. That shift in perspective opens the door to transformation. You stop being confined by history and start being guided by purpose. The strongest identities are built through alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions reflect the same direction, your mind becomes steady. Internal conflict begins to fade because you are no longer divided within yourself. Alignment creates a sense of wholeness that strengthens resilience. Your identity affects how you handle responsibility. When you see yourself as capable, challenges become opportunities to grow. When you see yourself as inadequate, responsibilities feel overwhelming. The same situation can either strengthen or weaken you depending on what you believe about yourself. Mental strength grows when you learn to see yourself with honesty and hope at the same time. Honesty allows you to acknowledge where you need growth. Hope allows you to believe that growth is possible. Together, they create a balanced perspective that supports lasting change. Some of the limitations you feel today exist only because you accepted them as permanent truths. Questioning those assumptions opens space for new possibilities. The beliefs you inherited or absorbed do not have to remain unchanged. Your identity can evolve as your understanding deepens. Every time you choose courage over fear, you reinforce a stronger identity. Every time you continue after disappointment, you strengthen your sense of resilience. Every time you refuse to give up on growth, you confirm that change is real within you. Identity determines how far you believe you can go. It sets the boundaries of your vision before your journey even begins. Expanding your identity expands what feels possible. When your mind accepts a larger picture of who you can become, your actions begin to move toward that vision. The person you see in your mind will influence the life you build in reality. When you begin to see yourself as disciplined, resilient, and capable, your decisions begin to reflect that belief. The picture you carry inside becomes the direction your life begins to follow. Mental strength grows from the inside outward, and identity is the foundation upon which that strength stands. When identity becomes clear and steady, your mind gains a stability that circumstances cannot easily shake. The stronger your sense of self becomes, the less easily your confidence is disturbed by temporary setbacks or shifting opinions.